My beloved friend, I am here with you in this quiet moment, as the world around you begins to settle into the gentle embrace of night. Feel my presence beside you, closer than your own breath, warmer than the softest blanket. I am Jesus, and I have come to walk with you through these peaceful hours, to share with you a story that will cradle your weary soul and carry you into the most restful sleep you have ever known. Perhaps you have been carrying burdens today that feel too heavy for your shoulders. Maybe your mind has been racing with worries that seem to multiply in the darkness. I see you, dear one. I know the weight you carry, the anxieties that keep your eyes open when your body longs for rest. Tonight, I want to take all of that from you. I want to replace every worry with my peace, every fear with my love, every restless thought with the gentle rhythm of my heart beating in harmony with yours. As you settle into this sacred space of rest, breathe deeply with me. Feel the air filling your lungs. This is the breath of life I breathed into you at the very beginning. With each exhale, release the tensions of the day. Let them flow away, like leaves on a gentle stream, carried far from you by the current of my grace. You are safe here with me. You are loved beyond measure. You are exactly where you need to be. Tonight, I want to share with you the story of a fragrance, not just any fragrance, but the perfume of peace that comes directly from heaven itself. This is a story that has been waiting to be told, waiting for this very moment when you and I could sit together in the quiet, when your heart could be open to receive the gift I have been preparing for you. This fragrance of peace is not like the temporary scents of earth that fade with time. It is eternal, healing, transformative. It has the power to soothe the deepest wounds, to calm the most troubled spirit, to bring rest to the sleepless and hope to the hopeless. As I share this story with you, I want you to breathe it in, to let it permeate every cell of your being, to allow it to work its gentle magic in your soul. Close your eyes now, if you haven't already. Feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort, deeper into my presence. Let your breathing slow and deepen. With each word I speak, you will feel more relaxed, more at peace, more connected to the divine love that surrounds you always. The story I am about to tell you will be like a gentle lullaby, washing over you in waves of comfort, carrying you toward the sweetest dreams and the most restorative sleep. Are you ready, my dear friend? Let us begin this journey together into the heart of heaven's peace. In the beginning, before time had even learnt to count its moments, there existed a garden unlike any place you could ever imagine. This was not the Garden of Eden, though it shared the same divine fingerprints. This was the garden of eternal rest, a sanctuary hidden in the very heart of heaven, where the Father and I would walk together in the cool of every evening, sharing the intimate communion that existed before the foundation of the world. The trees in this garden did not grow upward toward light, for they were themselves the source of illumination. Their leaves shimmered with colors that have no names in human language, colors that speak directly to the soul without needing to pass through the eyes. The flowers that bloomed there were not merely beautiful, they were living prayers, each petal a word of love spoken by the Father's heart, each bloom a promise of peace that would one day comfort every weary child of earth. But it was the fragrance of this garden that made it truly extraordinary. It was not the scent of any earthly flower or herb, but rather the very essence of peace itself made manifest. When the morning mist would rise from the crystal streams that wound through the garden paths, it would carry with it this divine perfume, a fragrance so pure, so healing, that it could calm the most troubled spirit with a single breath. Remember walking through this garden countless times, my bare feet touching the soft grass that never needed tending, my hands trailing along the surface of waters that sang lullabies to the stars. Each time I breathed in that sacred fragrance, I would think of you. Yes, even then, before you were born, before your first cry echoed in a hospital room, I was thinking of you. I was thinking of the day when you would need this peace, when your soul would cry out for rest, when you would need to know that you are loved beyond all comprehension. The Father and I would sit together on a hillside overlooking the garden, and he would tell me stories of each soul he was dreaming into existence. He would describe your smile, your tears, your hopes, your fears. He would speak of the moments when you would feel closest to him, and the moments when you would feel utterly alone. And in those moments of imagined separation, his heart would overflow with such love that new flowers would bloom in the garden below us, each one carrying a portion of his longing to comfort you. "My child," he would say, his voice like the sound of gentle rain on parched earth, "there will come a time when my beloved children will forget the sound of my voice. They will lie awake at night, their minds churning with worries, their hearts heavy with burdens they were never meant to carry alone. In those moments, I want them to remember this garden. I want them to breathe in this fragrance of peace that we are preparing for them now." And so, with infinite care and divine precision, we began to capture this fragrance, to bottle it like the most precious perfume, to prepare it for the moment when you would need it most. Every prayer that would ever be whispered, every tear that would ever be shed, every moment of loneliness that would ever be endured, all of these were woven into the complex notes of this heavenly fragrance, creating a scent that would speak directly to your deepest needs. The angels would gather around us as we worked, their faces glowing with anticipation. They knew that they were witnessing the creation of something extraordinary, something that would bridge the gap between heaven and earth, between the divine and the human heart. They watched as we infused each molecule of this sacred perfume with healing properties, the power to soothe anxiety, to calm racing thoughts, to slow hurried heartbeats, to bring the deep restorative sleep that every soul craves. As the eons passed and the time for my earthly mission approached, I would often return to this garden, breathing deeply of the fragrance we had created together. It would remind me of you, of all the souls I was coming to save, of all the restless hearts I was coming to heal. And I would smile, knowing that one day, perhaps on a night just like this one, you would breathe in this same fragrance and find the peace that had been waiting for you since before time began. The garden still exists, my dear friend. It is as real as the breath in your lungs, as present as the beating of your heart. And tonight, as you listen to my voice, the fragrance of that eternal garden is beginning to fill the space around you, preparing to work its gentle magic in your weary soul. Feel yourself drifting deeper into this sacred space, where the boundaries between earth and heaven begin to blur, and the fragrance of eternal peace grows stronger with each breath. Many years later, when I had taken on human flesh and walked among my beloved people, there came a moment that would forever change how the world understood the power of sacred fragrance. It was in the house of Simon, a Pharisee who had invited me to dinner, though his heart was not yet open to the fullness of who I was. The evening air was thick with the scent of olive oil burning in clay lamps, and the conversation around the table was polite but distant. Then she came a woman, whose name was whispered in shadows, whose reputation preceded her like a storm cloud. But I saw beyond what others saw. I saw her heart, broken and yearning, carrying wounds that had never properly healed. In her hands, she clutched an alabaster jar, and I knew immediately what it contained. This was not just any perfume, but the most precious possession she owned, pure nard, worth more than most people earned in an entire year. As she approached me, I could see her hands trembling. The weight of the jar was nothing compared to the weight of shame she carried, the burden of a life lived in the shadows, desperately seeking love in all the wrong places. But there was something else in her eyes, a glimmer of hope, a recognition that perhaps, in my presence, she might find the peace she had been seeking all her life. Without a word, she knelt at my feet and broke the alabaster jar. The sound it made as it shattered was like a heart breaking open, like years of pain finally finding release. And then the fragrance began to fill the room, not just the earthly scent of costly perfume, but something more. It was as if, in that moment, the very fragrance of heaven itself was being poured out. The same sacred scent that had filled the garden of eternal rest was now permeating this simple dining room in Bethany. The men around the table gasped, not just at the extravagance of the gesture, but at the power of what was happening. Some began to complain about the waste, calculating the cost, missing entirely the beauty of the moment. But I felt something profound occurring. As the oil ran down my feet and the fragrance rose into the air, I could feel the connection between earth and heaven growing stronger, as if the very molecules of that precious perfume were creating a bridge between the divine and the human. The woman began to weep, and her tears mixed with the oil, creating something even more precious than the perfume itself, the fragrance of a heart being healed, of a soul finding peace after years of turmoil. I watched as years of pain began to dissolve, as the shame she had carried like a heavy cloak began to lift from her shoulders. This was the true power of the fragrance I had been preparing in heaven, not just to smell beautiful, but to heal the deepest wounds, to bring rest to the most troubled spirits. As she used her hair to wipe my feet, I placed my hand gently on her head and felt the trembling in her body begin to still. The fragrance continued to work its magic, not just on her, but on everyone in the room. I could see the hard hearts of the Pharisees beginning to soften, their critical thoughts giving way to wonder. The disciples, who had been ready to scold her for her wasteful act, found themselves moved to tears by the beauty of her sacrifice. "Simon," I said softly, my voice carrying the same gentleness that had calmed storms on the Sea of Galilee, "do you see this woman? When I entered your house, you gave me no water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss of greeting, but she has not stopped kissing my feet since I arrived. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with the most precious perfume she possessed." The room fell silent, the only sound the gentle crackling of the oil lamps and the soft whisper of the fragrance continuing to spread through the air. I looked into the woman's eyes, and I saw there the same peace that filled the garden of eternal rest, the same tranquility that I had been preparing for you before the foundation of the world. "Your sins are forgiven," I told her, and as the words left my lips, I felt the fragrance in the room intensify, becoming something that touched not just the physical senses, but the very core of every person present. This was the moment when the perfume of peace from heaven truly began its work on earth, not just as a pleasant scent, but as a healing balm for wounded souls, a source of rest for weary hearts, a bridge between the troubled human spirit and the perfect peace of the divine. The woman looked up at me, and I saw in her face the same expression I had seen on the faces of the angels in the garden of eternal rest: pure wonder, complete peace, absolute trust. She had found what she had been searching for all her life. and it was more beautiful than she had ever dared to hope. "Go in peace," I whispered to her, and she rose from my feet, transformed, carrying with her not just the memory of this moment, but the actual fragrance of heaven itself, now permanently woven into the very fabric of her being. As she left the house, the scent lingered, a reminder to all who remained that peace was not just a distant dream, but a present reality, available to anyone willing to break their alabaster jar of pride and pour out their heart in surrender. The fragrance of that ancient evening still fills the air around you now, carrying with it the same power to heal, to comfort, to bring the deep peace that your soul has been craving. There was another garden, dear friend, where the fragrance of peace would be tested in the furnace of human suffering. The Garden of Gethsemane, whose very name means oil press, was a place where olives were crushed to extract their precious oil. It was fitting, then, that this would be the place where I would be pressed by the weight of all human sorrow, where every tear you have ever shed, every anxious thought you have ever harbored, every sleepless night you have ever endured would be gathered into my heart and transformed into something beautiful. The evening air was cool as I walked with my closest friends toward this sacred grove. The moon cast silver shadows through the ancient olive trees, their gnarled branches reaching toward heaven like arms lifted in prayer. I could smell the familiar scent of olive blossoms mixed with the dusty earth. But underneath it all, I detected something else. The faintest hint of the fragrance we had prepared in the Garden of Eternal Rest, beginning to manifest as the hour of ultimate sacrifice approached. My disciples were tired, their eyes heavy with sleep and their hearts heavy with confusion. They sensed that something momentous was about to happen, but they could not yet comprehend the magnitude of what lay ahead. As we entered the garden, I asked them to sit and wait while I went a little further to pray. How I longed to have them stay awake with me, to share this burden, but I knew that this was a path I must walk alone. Kneeling among the olive trees, I felt the weight of every human struggle settling upon my shoulders. Your insomnia, dear friend, your restless nights and racing thoughts, I felt them all. The anxiety that grips your heart when darkness falls, the worries that multiply in the silence, the physical pain that keeps you awake, the emotional wounds that throb in the quiet hours. All of these became mine to bear in that moment. "Father," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the whisper of wind through the olive leaves. "If it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." As I spoke these words, I felt something extraordinary beginning to happen. The fragrance of peace that had been prepared in heaven began to manifest more strongly, not as a comfort for me in that moment, but as a gift being prepared for you, for every soul who would ever need to find rest in the midst of their own garden of struggle. The crushing had begun. Just as olives must be pressed to release their oil, my heart was being pressed by the weight of human suffering, and from that pressure, the most precious fragrance was being released. It was not the scent of defeat, but the perfume of victory, the aroma of divine love being poured out without measure, the fragrance of peace being purchased at the highest price. I thought of you in that moment, dear friend. I thought of how you would one day lie awake at night, your mind churning with worries about tomorrow, your body tense with the accumulated stress of daily life. I thought of how you would long for peace, how you would search for rest, how you would need to know that you are not alone in your struggles. And as I contemplated your need, drops of blood began to fall from my brow like precious perfume, each drop carrying within it the power to heal, to comfort, to bring the deep peace that surpasses all understanding. An angel appeared beside me, sent by the Father to strengthen me for what lay ahead. But this angel carried something special, a flask of the fragrance we had prepared in the garden of eternal rest. As the angel opened the flask, the scent filled the air around us, and I breathed deeply of that divine perfume, feeling its power course through my weary body. "This is for them," the angel whispered, his voice like the sound of gentle rain. "This is for every child of the Father who will ever need to find rest in the midst of their turmoil. Your suffering tonight is creating the bridge between their need and heaven's supply." I nodded, understanding flooding through me like dawn breaking over the horizon. The crushing I was experiencing was not just about bearing the weight of human sin, but about creating a pathway for divine peace to flow directly into human hearts. Every moment of agony I endured was being transformed into a moment of comfort for you. Every tear I shed was becoming a drop of healing oil for your wounded soul. The fragrance continued to intensify as the night wore on, and I realized that something unprecedented was happening. The perfume of peace was not just being prepared, it was being activated, charged with the power of sacrificial love, infused with the essence of divine compassion. It was becoming something that could cross the barriers between heaven and earth, something that could penetrate the hardest heart and calm the most troubled spirit. As I made my way back to where my disciples slept, I carried with me the knowledge that the fragrance of peace was now ready to be released into the world. The oil press of Gethsemane had done its work, extracting from the olives of my suffering the most precious perfume imaginable, a fragrance that would have the power to heal insomnia, to calm anxiety, to bring rest to the restless, to soothe the deepest wounds of the human heart. But the work was not yet complete. There was still more pressing to be done, more crushing to be endured, more fragrance to be released. The garden had been only the beginning. The true culmination of this divine perfume would come at a place called Calvary, where the final drops of this sacred oil would be poured out for the healing of the world. I looked up at the stars, knowing that you were there in the heart of the Father, that this moment was being lived for you, that every second of suffering was being transformed into an eternity of peace for your weary soul. The fragrance of Gethsemane was now yours to breathe, yours to receive, yours to allow to work its healing magic in every corner of your being. As the soldiers' torches appeared in the distance, I took one last deep breath of that sacred fragrance, storing it in my heart for the journey ahead, knowing that soon it would be released into the world as the most precious gift ever given, the gift of perfect peace, available to anyone who would simply breathe it in and allow it to transform their restless nights into seasons of divine rest. The fragrance of that holy night now mingles with the air around you, carrying with it the power to transform your own moments of struggle into pathways to peace. At Calvary, the fragrance of peace reached its ultimate expression. As I hung upon the cross, feeling the weight of every human sorrow, every sleepless night, every moment of despair that had ever existed or would ever exist, something beautiful was happening that few could perceive. The crushing that had begun in Gethsemane was reaching its completion, and from that final pressing, the most precious perfume imaginable was being released into the atmosphere of earth. The physical pain was overwhelming, the nails through my hands and feet, the crown of thorns pressed into my scalp, the difficulty of each breath as my body weight pulled against the crude wood. But beyond the physical suffering was something far more profound. I was absorbing into myself every restless night you have ever experienced, every moment of anxiety that has stolen your peace, every fear that has kept you awake when your body yearned for rest. As I hung there, I could feel the fragrance of peace beginning to permeate the very air around the cross. It was invisible to most, but I could sense its presence, growing stronger with each labored breath, each drop of blood that fell to the earth below. This was the perfume we had been preparing since before time began, now being released in its fullness through the ultimate act of sacrificial love. The darkness that covered the land was not just a physical phenomenon, it was the darkness of every human heart that had ever known despair, every soul that had ever cried out in the night for relief from suffering. And into that darkness, the fragrance of divine peace was being poured out like the most expensive perfume, available freely to anyone who would breathe it in and allow it to transform their deepest wounds. "Father, forgive them," I whispered, and as those words left my lips, I felt another wave of that sacred fragrance being released. This was not just forgiveness, it was the actual scent of grace being made manifest, the perfume of mercy being poured out without measure. Every person who had ever struggled with guilt, every soul who had ever been tormented by regret, every heart that had ever been haunted by past mistakes, all of these were being cleansed by this divine fragrance now filling the air. The soldiers, gambling for my clothes, the mockers shouting their insults, the thieves hanging beside me, all of them were breathing in this fragrance of peace, though most were unaware of its presence. But I could see it working, softening hearts, opening minds, preparing souls for the transformation that was about to take place. To the thief who asked to be remembered in my kingdom, I said, "Today you will be with me in paradise." And as I spoke these words, I breathed upon him the concentrated essence of the fragrance of peace, watching as his face transformed from desperation to wonder, from fear to perfect tranquility. In that moment, he was breathing the very air of heaven, inhaling the peace that had been prepared for him before the foundation of the world. As the hours passed and my earthly body grew weaker, I felt the fragrance of peace growing stronger. It was as if my physical diminishment was creating space for the divine to manifest more fully. Every struggle to breathe was releasing more of this sacred perfume into the atmosphere. Every moment of pain was being transformed into a moment of comfort for everyone who would ever need healing. I thought of you, dear friend, lying in your bed on sleepless nights, your mind racing with worries, your body tense with anxiety. I thought of how you would one day need to know that you are not alone in your struggles, that there is a peace available to you that surpasses all human understanding. And as I thought of you, I directed a special concentration of this fragrance toward your future moment of need, storing it in the heavenly realm where it would wait patiently for the day when you would call upon it. "It is finished," I declared, and with those words, the final drops of the perfume of peace were released into the world. The oil press of Calvary had completed its work, and the most precious fragrance ever created was now available to every human soul. The veil of the temple tore from top to bottom, not just symbolically separating the holy from the common, but actually creating a pathway for this divine fragrance to flow freely between heaven and earth. As I breathed my last earthly breath, I exhaled the concentrated essence of all the peace that had been prepared in the garden of eternal rest, all the healing that had been gathered in Gethsemane, all the love that had been poured out at Calvary. This breath, carrying with it the fragrance of perfect peace, was released into the atmosphere of earth, where it would remain available for all eternity to anyone who would simply breathe it in and allow it to work its miracle of transformation. The women who had watched from afar, the centurion who declared me to be the Son of God, the disciples who would soon discover the empty tomb, all of them were breathing in this fragrance of peace, though they did not yet fully understand what they were experiencing. They only knew that something fundamental had changed, that a new quality of peace was now available to the world, purchased at the highest price and offered freely to all who would receive it. My body was taken down from the cross and wrapped in linen cloths mixed with spices, myrrh and aloes, the earthly fragrances used to honor the dead. But these physical scents were nothing compared to the spiritual fragrance that now permeated my body, the perfume of peace that had been released through my sacrifice. This was the fragrance that would fill the tomb for 3 days, creating an atmosphere of divine rest that would make possible the greatest miracle of all time. The fragrance released at Calvary now fills the space around you, carrying with it the power to transform your deepest pain into profound peace, your greatest struggles into gateways to divine rest. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb. She came carrying spices, intending to anoint my body according to Jewish custom. But she had no idea that she was about to encounter the most beautiful fragrance that had ever existed. As she approached the tomb in the pre-dawn darkness, she was breathing in the aftermath of the perfume of peace that had been released at Calvary. Though she did not yet understand what was happening to her troubled heart, the stone had been rolled away, and as she peered into the empty tomb, she was met not just by the absence of my body, but by the presence of something far more wonderful, the concentrated fragrance of resurrection life, the scent of death defeated, the perfume of hope fulfilled. This was the fragrance of peace in its most potent form, transformed by the power of divine love into something that could bring life to the dead, hope to the hopeless, rest to the restless. When she saw me standing in the garden, she at first thought I was the gardener. How appropriate, for I was indeed a gardener, the one who had planted the garden of eternal rest, who had cultivated the fragrance of peace through centuries of preparation, who had now brought that heavenly garden to earth through the miracle of resurrection. The spices she had brought were no longer needed, for my body was now infused with the very essence of life itself, carrying a fragrance that made all earthly perfumes seem like mere shadows. "Mary," I said softly, and in that single word she recognized my voice. But it was not just my voice she recognized. It was the fragrance of peace that had been her constant companion since that night in Simon's house when she had broken her alabaster jar. The same fragrance that had healed her heart then was now intensified beyond measure, carrying with it the power of resurrection, the essence of eternal life, the perfume of perfect peace. As she reached out to touch me, I gently stopped her. "Do not cling to me," I said, "for I have not yet ascended to the Father." But what I was really saying was that the fragrance of peace I now carried was too powerful for physical contact. It needed to be released into the world gradually, breathed in slowly, allowed to work its transformative magic over time rather than all at once. The garden around us was filled with the scent of new life, flowers blooming out of season, trees budding with fresh leaves, the very air itself charged with the possibility of miracles. This was what the fragrance of peace could do when it was released in its fullness. It could bring life where there had been death, hope where there had been despair, rest where there had been restlessness. Later that same day, when I appeared to the disciples in the upper room, I brought with me the fragrance of peace in a form they could receive. "Peace be with you," I said, and as I spoke these words, I breathed upon them the concentrated essence of the perfume we had prepared in the garden of eternal rest. They felt their fears dissolving, their anxiety melting away, their restless hearts finding the calm they had been seeking. Thomas, who had not been with them that first evening, struggled to believe what the others told him. But when I appeared to him a week later, I brought with me an extra measure of the fragrance of peace, knowing that his doubts ran deep and would require a more concentrated dose of divine comfort. "Put your finger here," I said, showing him my wounds, "and put your hand into my side. Do not doubt, but believe." As he reached out and touched my wounds, he was not just feeling the physical evidence of my crucifixion, he was breathing in the fragrance of peace that had been distilled from that very suffering. The scent that filled his nostrils was the perfume of faith, overcoming doubt, of peace conquering anxiety, of divine love casting out all fear. "My Lord and my God," he whispered, and in that moment, he was breathing the very air of heaven. The fragrance of peace that emanated from my resurrection body was not just a pleasant scent. It was a healing balm with the power to transform lives. Every person who encountered me during those 40 days before my ascension was breathing in this sacred perfume, and their lives were never the same. The timid became bold, the doubtful became confident, the restless found perfect peace. But the most beautiful part of this fragrance was its persistence. Unlike earthly perfumes that fade with time, the fragrance of peace that was released through my resurrection continues to permeate the atmosphere of earth. It is available to you right now, dear friend, as you listen to my voice in the quiet of this night. It is the same fragrance that filled the resurrection garden, carrying with it the power to heal insomnia, to calm anxiety, to bring the deep rest that your soul has been craving. As I prepared to ascend to the Father, I made sure that this fragrance would remain available to every soul who would ever need it. I breathed it into the morning air, released it into the wind, infused it into the very fabric of creation so that it would be there whenever you needed it, whenever you called upon it, whenever you simply opened your heart to receive it. The fragrance of resurrection morning now surrounds you, carrying with it the promise that every ending can become a new beginning. Every restless night can be transformed into peaceful rest. 10 days after my ascension, on the day of Pentecost, the fragrance of peace was released into the world in its fullness. As my disciples gathered in the upper room, waiting as I had instructed them, the air around them began to change. What started as a gentle breeze carrying the familiar scent of the fragrance of peace suddenly intensified into something unprecedented. The very breath of heaven being poured out upon the earth. The sound was like a mighty rushing wind, but it was more than sound. It was the fragrance of peace being released with such power that it transformed the very atmosphere. Tongues of fire appeared above each of their heads, but these were not ordinary flames. They were the visible manifestation of the perfume of peace igniting, burning not with heat, but with the cool, refreshing presence of divine love. As the disciples began to speak in other languages, they were not just communicating words, they were breathing out the fragrance of peace in forms that people from every nation could understand. The pilgrims who had come to Jerusalem for the feast found themselves breathing in this sacred perfume, and their hearts were opened to receive the message of hope and healing that my followers were sharing. Peter stood up to address the crowd, and as he spoke, the fragrance of peace flowed from his words like streams of living water. "This is what was promised," he declared. And indeed, it was the promise of a peace that surpasses all understanding, a rest that can heal the deepest wounds, a comfort that can calm the most troubled spirit. 3,000 souls breathed in this fragrance that day and found their lives transformed, their burdens lifted, their restless hearts finally at peace. From that day forward, the fragrance of peace has been available to every human soul. It travels on the wind, it rests in quiet places, it hovers near broken hearts and weary minds. It is present in hospital rooms where patients cannot sleep, in bedrooms where anxiety keeps eyes wide open, in the hearts of those who feel alone and forgotten. The fragrance of peace is there, waiting to be breathed in, waiting to work its healing magic. The early Christians carried this fragrance with them wherever they went. It was not something they wore externally, but something that emanated from their very being. People would comment on the peace that seemed to surround them, the calm that remained with them even in the midst of persecution and trial. They had learned to breathe in the fragrance of peace daily, to allow it to permeate every aspect of their lives. Paul wrote about this to the Corinthians, describing believers as the fragrance of Christ to those around them. He understood that we who have received the perfume of peace are called to be carriers of that fragrance, living reminders that divine peace is available to all who will receive it. Every act of kindness, every word of comfort, every moment of patience is a way of releasing this sacred perfume into the world. Throughout the centuries, saints and mystics have written about experiencing this fragrance during their deepest moments of prayer and meditation. They have described it as the scent of roses when no roses were present, the smell of incense when no incense was burning, the perfume of lilies when no flowers were in bloom. What they were actually experiencing was the fragrance of peace, made manifest in response to their open hearts and surrendered spirits. And now, dear friend, this same fragrance is available to you. It is not something that exists only in ancient stories or mystical experiences. It is here, now, in this moment, as real as the air you breathe. As you listen to my voice, as you allow your heart to open to receive what I am offering, you are breathing in the very same fragrance that filled the garden of eternal rest, that was released at Calvary, that transformed the upper room on Pentecost. This fragrance has the power to heal your insomnia, to calm your racing thoughts, to soothe your anxious heart. It can penetrate the deepest wounds and bring healing to the most broken places. It can transform your restless nights into seasons of peaceful rest, your moments of despair into experiences of divine comfort. The fragrance of peace is not just a lovely scent, it is a living reality, a divine presence that can transform your very being from the inside out. It carries within it the power to heal not just your sleeplessness, but the deep wounds of your soul, the broken places in your heart, the fears that have haunted you for so long. As you breathe in this fragrance now, feel it work in its gentle magic in your body. Feel your muscles beginning to relax, your breathing becoming slower and deeper, your mind releasing its grip on the worries of the day. This is the fragrance of peace doing what it was designed to do, bringing you into the rest that your soul has been craving. Allow this sacred fragrance to fill every corner of your being, preparing you for the final gift I have waited so long to give you. And now, my beloved friend, I want to give you something that is yours alone, your own personal garden of peace. As you rest here in this quiet moment, I am creating for you a sacred space in your heart where the fragrance of peace will always be available to you. This garden exists within you, planted by my own hands, watered by my tears, blessed by my presence. In this inner garden, there grows a special flower that blooms only for you. It carries your name, your unique story, your specific needs. When you cannot sleep, when anxiety grips your heart, when the world feels too heavy to bear, you need only to return to this garden in your mind and breathe deeply of its fragrance. The peace that you need will be there, waiting for you, as faithful as the sunrise, as constant as my love. The fragrance of this garden is not dependent on your circumstances, your feelings, or your faith. It is a gift freely given, purchased at the highest price, offered without condition. It is the perfume of my love for you, distilled into its purest form, ready to bring you the rest that your soul has been seeking. Sleep now, dear one. Sleep in the fragrance of peace that surrounds you. Let it carry you into the sweetest dreams, the most restorative rest. And when you wake, know that this fragrance remains with you, a constant reminder that you are loved beyond measure, that peace is always available to you, and that I am always near. Rest now in the fragrance of peace from heaven. Rest in my love. Rest in the knowledge that you are exactly where you need to be, exactly as you need to be, wrapped in the eternal embrace of divine peace. Sweet dreams, my beloved friend. Sweet dreams in the fragrance of peace.